Live from the Sports Madness studios here in San Antonio, Texas, you are watching Sports Madness here on YouTube. I want to thank everybody for joining us on today's podcast. Today's going to be a special podcast. We're going to be talking about the state of women's athletics and women's competitive sports in the United States and how it compares to other countries in the world. I'm your host, David Vaughn. Thank you so much for coming into the Madhouse today. This promises to be a good discussion, one that's going to hopefully open up some dialogue and maybe, have some conversations amongst ourselves. Every now and then, when, in the world of sports talk, you cover a topic that has a little bit of importance to it and something that, is a little bit deeper than the X's and O's and something that's a little bit deeper than the results on the scoreboard. And this is going to be one of those episodes. So we do want to thank everybody for joining us today for this discussion. We're going to start out by talking about, I'm going to read it so that I make sure I get it right. A gymnast from LSU was talking about attendance at women's college gymnastics events. She was talking about the lack of attendance at the games, or excuse me, at the matches. Attendance. Okay, sorry, I just got to make sure that I've got it up. Okay, so so Olivia Dodd on X said, "I'm sitting here watching NCAA gymnastics and the empty seats are concerning. I care deeply about the growth in women's sports, especially in the NCAA. If you want fans to enjoy the sport and increase viewership, you have to look at what makes the crowds go crazy. People understand what a perfect 10 is and want people to do things that look great to be rewarded. Too many deductions taken at judges' discretion feels like watching a basketball game that's consistently interrupted with penalties or a flag football game. Or a football game with flags on every play. At some point, it feels negative and loses the entertainment factor that draws the crowd in. The number of questions I'm currently getting from fans about the scoring is significant enough for me to share this concern. I love the art and the intricacy of gymnastics, but let's get more eyes on the sport. This is not about LSU. This is about the sport. I'm in my 5th year and I have an audience of casual fans, so maybe I'm in a unique position to see what's happening with fans differently than people just looking at attendance numbers. Fans are confused. I also spend time raising money for female athletes and will always advocate for athletes. Making changes that can impact the entertainment value will affect athletes financially as well. Female sports in the NCAA have to focus on building crowd engagements to continue to get revenue support for the athletes." And this is not the first time that we've heard something like this from athletes, people like in a position of authority to speak on the subject in concern with attendance. It's cherry Coke, nothing to worry about in there. Nothing illegal at all. It's just cherry Coke. So let's kind of start and let's take a look at what draws people into these events. How can women's athletic events get better attendance, better viewership, things like that? So she's talking about gymnastics specifically. I think it's fair to say that most of us that don't follow gymnastics as closely as we do other sports that are assigned numerical values like football, basketball, baseball, etc., don't necessarily understand what it takes to get a perfect 10 on a performance. How do you get a 10? How do you get a perfect score? People don't understand the scoring system in gymnastics, just like they don't understand the scoring system in ice skating, and even expanding it out into other like performing arts venues such as like competitive drum and bugle corps and things like that. People don't understand the scoring system behind these. Well, if you don't know what's going to produce a better result, it does kind of seem arbitrary, and it kind of seems like, oh, we like this person better than this person, therefore we're going to side with this person over this person. And that's just not the case. It's not the way that things go at all. But nobody really knows. You know, as a casual fan of gymnastics, and I will admit that I am a casual at best fan of gymnastics. I like watching it. If it's on, I'll stop flipping and I'll watch it. I can't look at a performance and be like, that was really good. What I can do is be like, that wasn't very good. I can tell you what a perfect score is not, but I can't tell you what gets you a top score. Like you can in football, where you say once you cross this spot, you know, once you go past this point, your team gets 6 points. Once you kick it through the goalpost, your team gets 3 points. In baseball, you hit the ball over the fence, your team gets 1 run for everyone that's on base. Same in softball. In track, you just have to be faster than the person next to you. But again, that's quantifiable. This person runs 100 meters in 9.85 seconds. If this person runs 100 meters in 9.78 seconds, then this person wins because they were faster. In gymnastics, it doesn't work that way. A lot of it has to do with degree of difficulty. And it's not necessarily how cleanly you do the routine, although that certainly does matter. I want to take a look. For instance, let's talk about Simone Biles. Simone Biles, easily the most athletic Olympian gymnast that the United States, maybe the world, has ever seen. As a casual fan, I look at what she does and it's amazing. It's unbelievable. But it's not clean. Like, I can't remember the last time I can say, man, she stuck that landing. She doesn't have to, because everything else that she's doing is such a higher difficulty, then it really doesn't matter, unless she just doesn't land it at all and, like, you know, lands on her butt. Then it matters. But, you know, but no, beyond that, you know, going and doing a vault and, you know, doing these amazing acrobatic feats in the air and landing and sticking that landing isn't as important as it used to be. Most of us that are my age or in the vicinity remember Carrie Strug and doing a vault on a severely sprained ankle and managing to stick the landing. And sticking the landing was a huge thing. Well, anymore, it's more about what you do during the vault than what you do at the end of the vault. In ice skating and figure skating is kind of the same thing. You know, if you jump in the air and you do 4.5 rotations while you're in the air and you landed on one foot, you're going to get kind of the maximum points for that. If you kind of bobble that landing, but you still landed on one foot, marks than if someone did, say, 3.5 rotations or 2.5 rotations. And then, of course, you have the Surya Bonali moment, who they banned backflips in the Olympics because you can't land it on one foot. She had already kind of messed up in her routine, so she's like, screw it. And she did the backflip at, I think it was Lillehammer, Norway, did a backflip in the middle of her Olympic routine and landed it on one foot. Basically just kind of a screw you to the US, to the IOC. Now, it's hard to get into a sport when you don't really know what you're looking at, other than, wow, that was impressive. Okay, quantify impressive. What does that mean? I don't know. Just do. So I think part of the issue, especially in like gymnastics and figure skating, is an optics issue. The casual fan, newer fans, don't know what they're looking for. So what you'll get, the new fans that you will get, excuse me, are going to be little girls that are impressed by what they see, usually at the collegiate level, at a school that they have ties to. For instance, the University of Oklahoma has top-notch gymnastics. Every little girl in the state of Oklahoma that likes gymnastics is going to want to go watch OU gymnastics. There's nothing wrong with that. Of that group, though, is that your target audience, first of all? No, unfortunately not. Your target audience is going to be their mom and dad. And if mom and dad can't get them to an event, directly to what Olivia Dunn's talking about, though. LSU is another gymnastics program that's top-notch, absolutely terrific. In practically every way, and equal to OU gymnastics. Why then is OU selling out their arena and LSU can't get anyone in the seats there? Why is it? It's not that OU is that much better than LSU. Most of the people that are going to these events are college students anyway. So, the cost is going to be marginally different. Why are they not getting the viewership? Go the other way then, because so OU is this much better than LSU. Well, let's go this way. You've got the University of Utah, another top tier program, but not nearly on the level of LSU and certainly not on the level of OU. But they're selling out their arena too. And it's not as high of quality in Salt Lake City as it is in Baton Rouge. So what's going on? Where's the disconnect? You kind of have to look and say, well, it's an optics problem, first and foremost. It's an optics problem. For some reason, gymnastics in Baton Rouge are not connecting the same with the populace as gymnastics in Salt Lake City or gymnastics in Norman. There are a couple reasons for this. First of all, the University of Oklahoma doesn't have an in-state rival for gymnastics. Oklahoma State does not have gymnastics. None of the other schools in the state have gymnastics that are on that level at all. So they kind of have the market to themselves. There are no rivals in Louisiana either. But geographically, Louisiana is a much smaller state. If you took a state the size of Oklahoma, well, Arkansas has good gymnastics. You've got Alabama. You've got, I think Ole Miss and Mississippi State also have gymnastics. You've got Auburn. So you've got all these schools. There's a lot more competition. So you're not going to have as many people. But still, you should have a good base of people. You shouldn't have gymnasts of this level competing in an empty gym. And I think a lot of it is that the casual fan or the new fan, someone that would even be interested in getting into gymnastics, can't, just because they don't understand the scoring system. I don't know how this works. Like if I'm watching a vaulter, here's what I know. And I know admittedly very, very little about gymnastics. Here's what I know about it. You run really fast, you jump, you flip really high, and you land. And if you don't fall down, you get a good score. Cool. Remember, though, that gymnastics are graded down to the thousandth of a point. And there's a reason for that. Because the margin of error between here and here is very small. You'll look at a team competition. There will be 6 schools there that do all the apparatuses. They do them all. They do the uneven bars. They do the vault. They do the floor exercise. They do the balance beam. They're doing all these different things. And at the end of the day, they add everyone's scores together. And from first place to last place is like 0.8 of a point difference. You want to get into a sport for competition, gymnastics is it. Because it's a coin flip from the very best to the worst. You're talking 1,000th of a point could make a massive difference. 100th of a point can decide a medal, and 1/10 of a point can decide a championship. It's cutthroat in gymnastics. Figure skating is the same, although not quite as close, because they have a lot more. There's a lot more variables, a lot more things. The scores can be higher. They kind of have like multipliers and things like that in place where like if you do this event or if you do this in this part of the routine, then you get like double the points. Like it's crazy. Like trying to figure out the scoring for figure skating is like trying to do calculus. It's wild. But I think part of the problem with gymnastics and figure skating, those are NCAA sports. And then kind of going into, like I said, the competitive drum and bugle corps circuit, where again, you've got thousandths of a point. Differentiating is it does tend to be arbitrary. It tends to be what the judges like. There's not a standard of it's got to be here. It has got to do this, and this has to happen. You have to have this. In any of those sports, it's no coincidence that they're all artistically related, though. And art is subjective. I think there's got to be a way to either explain the subjectivity or remove the subjectivity if it's ever going to fix the issue of people not coming to watch. But when it's done at a very high level, they don't have a problem. I mean, you look at the NCAA championships, you look at the Olympics, you look at the U.S. trials, there's not an empty seat in the place. And those are big arenas, seat 22,000 people. Place is packed out. And so, you do have to kind of consider what is it that's going to get people in the seats. I think there's got to be some sort of consistency. There's like they need to really come out and just say, this is what you have to do in order to get the very highest score. Now, let's move on to other sports that either share a sport with men or are similar enough to a men's sport that there can be a fairly even comparison drawn. Okay, let's start with softball. Softball, by most people's accounting, mine included, is the most exciting women's sport that there is. I love softball to the point where I would almost prefer softball over baseball, and I love baseball. Like, baseball's my thing. I'm not sure as a fan that I don't enjoy softball more. It's faster paced. It's more approachable. There's not nearly as much controversy surrounding it. And it's just exciting. It's an exciting sport. Most of the top level softball teams have no problem either filling up or at the very least having high attendance or high capacity at their games. I remember going to a Division II school in southeastern Arkansas, the University of Arkansas Monticello, and going to the softball games, and you couldn't find a seat at those things. That was a small school, had like 2,000 students. You couldn't find a seat for softball. Meanwhile, the baseball team across the way had like 15 people running around over there. Success begets eyeballs. Okay. You have success, people are going to watch. Just like anything, and this doesn't matter if it's men or women's, if you don't win and you don't get results, you're not going to have the eyes that the other sports are going to have. Now, if you take it up a notch, because there is a professional softball league in the United States. Nobody but the diehards even know about it. The only reason that I know about it is because I used to do play-by-play for the University of Texas at San Antonio. And one of the players on that team was drafted into this professional league. That's the only way that I even knew that there was a professional softball league. You certainly don't hear about it. And it's one of those things where you have, they don't advertise it, first of all. Like, I couldn't tell you, I know Akron, Ohio has a team. That's the only team that I know. And that's only because Megan Lowe was drafted there. There's a professional women's baseball league that I guarantee you've never heard of. I couldn't tell you where any of the teams are for that. Now you look at something like the WNBA. The WNBA is kind of in a popularity explosion at the moment. Before Caitlin Clark hit the league, do not come at me about Angel Reese. Before Caitlin Clark hit the league, I'm not going to say nobody cared, but it certainly wasn't making headlines. You didn't have teams with regularity drawing 12, 13, 14, 15,000 people like they do now. But that's a situation where they advertised the WNBA. They advertised it. And people still didn't go. In a setting like that, what you have to remember, you have to realize is it's not the same sport. It's the same sport. It's not the same, though. The players are smaller. The ball is smaller. The dimensions of the court are the same. But the game is not over the rim. It's not a power game. It's a finesse and intellect game. I'll stand by this all day long, and I may get some flack for this one, and I really don't care. When you have someone that says they will not ever watch the WNBA but claim to be a basketball fan, they're not a basketball fan. If you're not willing to watch the WNBA, first of all, I'll guarantee you haven't ever watched it. And secondly, you're not a basketball fan. You don't know anything about basketball. Come at me if you want to. You will lose. If you're unwilling to watch the WNBA just because it's the WNBA, odds are your basketball IQ is about that of a horsefly. With the new collective bargaining agreements in the WNBA, the players are getting paid more. There's still an optics issue, though. They're not advertising it. They're still kind of under the NBA umbrella, and so they're kind of at the mercy of the NBA. At some point, the WNBA is going to have to kind of get out from under that NBA umbrella. And they're going to have to kind of take those steps on their own. But people are going to have to be willing to invest in it. Right now, they're not. Why? I don't know. No, I do know. So businesses aren't going to invest in the WNBA because there's not eyes on it. But there aren't eyes on it because nobody's investing in it. And it's kind of this evil cycle. Someone's going to have to go out there and take a risk, take a chance on it. The other problem that the WNBA has, and the WNBA has it probably more than any other league, is the WNBA inserts politics into everything. Whether you agree with those political views or not, they insert politics into everything. Everything in WNBA is politically motivated. In the NBA, you have players that have stances. Sometimes they share those stances, sometimes they don't. And that's fine. That's fine. You're Americans, you're in the United States, whether you're an American or not, you get to do that. In the WNBA, though, the league makes political stances and statements. And a lot of people are going to be turned off just because they don't want politics rammed down their throats, whether they agree with it or not. There are times where you just want to go enjoy a game. Say you have a daughter that's really good at basketball and she wants to see what she could become. You go to a WNBA game, but instead you spend 30 minutes pregame being lectured to about XYZ political point. Nobody wants that. So they either don't go or they arrive late. Women's soccer in the United States, though, is a whole different ballgame. They outdraw the men 8 times out of 10. When the U.S. national team, the women's U.S. national team is playing, they're going to sell out. They're going to have tons and tons and tons of people there. Why? Because they're good. They're successful. They've had success for a long period of time. So you look at it, they've had success kind of from the off. And so they've had the eyes, they have the money. They're getting, they've gotten their pay situation squared away. They don't have a problem drawing people. To address the elephant in the room, with all these sports, though, there is going to be that element that isn't going to go because it's women. That element is out there. However, that element aren't going to any sporting events. Much like when you have kind of fringe groups that protest insert sports team here and are calling for boycotts of this team, they're not going to sporting events anyway. The group that's going to refuse to go to a women's sporting event because it's a women's sporting event, they're not going to any sporting events. So that is not a reason why the attendance is down on the women's side. I think part of it is in the United States specifically, we do kind of have this Olympic mindset of faster, higher, stronger. Without getting into the whole genetics of things, men generally are faster. Generally, they are more athletic. Generally, they're stronger. Americans want fast. They want hard hitting. They want whatever it is that's going to, just grab your attention and punch you in the face. We have like a 3 to 5 second attention span here in the US. Most women's sports, it takes longer than that to establish what they're doing. They're coming after me. But no, it takes longer than that to establish what they're doing. No, I don't want to wait that long. So they just move on. I think what it comes down to, and I think the reason behind why women's sports are less attended than men's sports is that people don't understand and they don't want to take the time to understand the difference in the nuance. Gymnastics, figure skating, drum corps, they have an optics problem. They're not covered, or I mean, they're not watched as much because you don't know what you're looking for. The other sports are not watched simply because we're not patient enough. So what I would do is I would challenge you to take some time. Take some time. Watch a WNBA game. Watch a softball game. Watch a gymnastics meet if there's one around you. Go check it out. See what it's about. Because these women that are busting their butts just as hard as the men are busting theirs deserve the same attention. They do. And if you happen to be fortunate enough to be in the vicinity of a team that's really, really good, go check it out. Go watch what these women are doing at the very, very highest level. The U.S. women's cricket team. I guarantee you didn't even know we had cricket in the United States. The U.S. women's cricket team, the under-19 women's cricket team, just made it to the Super Sixes of the Cricket World Cup in Bangladesh. You didn't hear about it anywhere. We have an optics problem. Women's sports are good. They're good for the country. They're good for these women. They're just good in general. So keep an eye on these sports. Go watch them. Go watch a local dance competition. See what it's about. Take a friend with you. Be loud, be rowdy. Because I guarantee you, these sports, especially sports that may be a little bit more traditionally subdued crowds, they would much rather have a group of rowdy people than a bunch of non-people in the stands. Even if it's a subdued sport. You won't be sorry. The quality is very, very good. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Sports Madness. Kind of a little bit heavier episode, a little bit more of an editorial episode, and that's okay. That's going to happen from time to time. But we'll be back tomorrow with more sports talk here in the Madhouse. We're going to talk more NBA. We're going to talk more NA. We're going to talk some NHL. We're going to talk men's and women's college basketball. A lot of stuff going on right now. We're going to be talking about baseball season is going to be kicking off here before too long. Spring training is like a week and a half away. So it is time, y'all. And so, college baseball, college softball are kicking off. We're going to be talking about that too. So we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on here in the Madhouse upcoming. But until next time, this is David Vaughn reminding you that there are good ships, wood ships, and ships that sail the seas, but the best ships are friendships. May they always be. Until next time, take care and God bless.